Young and the Restless spoilers. The night was thick with an unsettling darkness. A suffocating silence surrounded Daniel and Lucy as they stood in their living room, their minds consumed by the looming question. Where is Heather? Hours had passed since Heather's cryptic disappearance, and despite their desperate attempts to find her, they were left with nothing but fear and uncertainty. As they paced, grappling with their helplessness, a faint rustling outside broke through the quiet. At first, it was barely noticeable, like the whisper of wind, but then it grew louder, accompanied by the sound of heavy, stumbling footsteps. Daniel's heart raced. He darted to the window, his eyes straining in the dim light. A dark, drenched figure slowly emerged from the shadows, limping toward the house. The figure was soaked, water dripping from their body as if they had just crawled out of a river. The moonlight cast a pale glow over them, but their face remained hidden in the shadows. A thick silence hung in the air as Daniel watched the figure approach, a growing dread building in his chest. "Who's there?" Daniel shouted, his voice filled with tension. He stepped forward, shielding Lucy, his body instinctively prepared to protect her from whatever was lurking outside. A weak voice, hoarse and barely audible, broke through the air. "It's me, Heather." Daniel froze. He couldn't believe his ears. Lucy's hand flew to her mouth in shock. The voice, it was Heather's. But how? She had disappeared without a trace, and they had feared the worst. How could she have returned now, in this state? Before they could react, the figure stumbled into the doorway, collapsing onto the floor. Daniel rushed to her side, his heart pounding as he knelt down and looked at the broken woman lying before him. It was Heather, her clothes drenched, her face pale, and a large gash on her head. Blood had matted her hair, and her eyes, though fluttering open, were glazed with exhaustion and pain. "Heather." Daniel's voice was thick with emotion. He grabbed a nearby blanket, draping it over her shivering form as he frantically assessed her injuries. Lucy stood frozen, tears welling in her eyes, unable to process what she was seeing. "We need to get her to the hospital," Daniel muttered, his voice urgent but steady. He scooped Heather into his arms, her body limp and cold against him. Heather's eyes flickered weakly, and she tried to speak again, but the words came out as a whisper, incoherent and lost to the night. The drive to the hospital felt like an eternity. Daniel couldn't help but glance at Heather, her pale face illuminated by the soft glow of the dashboard lights. She had always been strong, fierce even, but now, seeing her like this, so vulnerable, so broken, filled him with a growing rage. Someone had done this to her, someone had hurt her, and Daniel was determined to At the hospital, doctors immediately rushed Heather into surgery. The wound on her head was severe, but Daniel had gotten her there just in time. Hours passed in agonizing silence as Daniel and Lucy waited in the sterile, fluorescent-lit hospital corridor. The ticking of the clock felt like a cruel reminder of every second that had passed since Heather's disappearance, every moment she had been suffering. Finally, the doctor emerged, his expression calm but serious. "She's stable," he said, looking at Daniel and Lucy. "The head injury was critical, but we managed to stop the bleeding. She's in recovery now. It'll take time for her to wake up, but with rest, she should make a full recovery." Relief washed over them, but it was tinged with lingering fear. Heather was alive, but she hadn't told them anything yet. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they were still in the dark. Who had done this to her? And why? For the next few days, Heather remained unconscious. Daniel visited her daily, sitting by her bedside watching the rise and fall of her chest, waiting for any sign that she was waking. He didn't tell anyone about her return. Not the police, not their friends, not even Sharon. Especially not Sharon. Sharon. The name lingered in Daniel's mind, a dark cloud that wouldn't go away. He had his suspicions about her for a long time. Something about her behavior lately had been off, strange, cold, distant. And now, with Heather's sudden return and near-death experience, Daniel's suspicions deepened. Could Sharon have had something to do with this? It seemed impossible, yet the pieces were beginning to fall into place. Heather had been acting secretive in the days before her disappearance, as if she had discovered something she wasn't supposed to. Something dangerous. Sharon had been the last person to see Heather before she went missing. And now, Heather had come back, barely clinging to life, with a head wound that suggested someone had tried to silence her. But Daniel couldn't act on assumptions. He needed to hear the truth from Heather herself. Days turned into a week, and still Heather remained unconscious. Daniel's frustration grew. He couldn't wait forever. The longer she stayed in the hospital, the more likely it was that whoever had hurt her would come looking to finish the job. But Daniel wasn't about to let that happen. He kept watch over her, ensuring no one suspicious came near. Finally, one evening, Daniel was by Heather's bedside when he saw her hand twitch. His heart leaped. Slowly, her eyes fluttered open and she blinked, trying to focus on the room around her. "Heather?" Daniel leaned in close, his voice soft but insistent. "It's me, Daniel. Can you hear me?" Heather's gaze shifted to him, her expression weak but determined. She nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears as the memories of what had happened flooded back. Daniel held her hand gently. "Don't try to talk too much yet. Just rest. You're safe now."